2023, we've received responses from 41 talented artists from all over the United States and Europe who shared their visions for how Herman Melville could be represented in this historic setting. The selection committee had the privilege and the challenge of considering many thoughtful proposals. While Melville's time here and his literary legacy are well known, we were looking for something that speaks to where New Bedford is today. A city where history doesn't just sit on a shelf, but actively sparks contemporary creativity, public art, and civic and community connection. We wanted a piece that captures a spirit of curiosity and adventure, grounding historical narrative firmly in our modern, creative, and maritime landscape. Steph Rocknack's vision stood out. Her approach reflects a deep respect for Melville's legacy while creating a public installation that invites today's residents and visitors to engage with him in a dynamic, personal way. Steph Rocknack is a self-taught sculptor and a scholar whose background bridges art, philosophy, and storytelling. She earned her PhD in philosophy from Boston University and serves as chair and professor of philosophy at Hartwick College. Many of you may already be familiar with her iconic Edgar Allan Poe statue in Boston, a masterclass in capturing the motion, urgency, and literary spirit of a historic figure in a public space. Her body of work gave our selection committee the confidence that she would bring the necessary energy and depth to this project, which she has described as her most ambitious, the same way Herman Melville described Moby Dick. Her work has been recognized nationally and featured at institutions including the Smithsonian, the Grolier Club in New York City, the Tampa Museum of Art, Saks Fifth Avenue, and now New Bedford Seamen's Bethel. Please join me in welcoming the sculptor of New Bedford's Herman Melville statue, Steph Rocknack.
Sculpture, I'd like to thank the mayor, the New Bedford Port Society, and the city of New Bedford for choosing me to create it. I particularly want to remember Bruce Oliveira, whom we lost last year, and thank his brother Phil and Janet Barbosa. Phil and Janet worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this happen. Thanks also to Bob Wallace for patiently proofreading multiple iterations of the hymn. And finally, thanks to Mark Shortliff and the crew at UAP for realizing the sculpture in bronze and overseeing the install. Public art is a team sport, and this sculpture exists because a great many people contributed to it. I've always been taken by Melville. I read a number of his short stories in college, which inspired me to read Moby Dick during the summer of my sophomore or junior year, and subsequently watched the 1956 film. After I graduated, I taught English in Japan for a while, and then took off on my bicycle through Southeast Asia and Australia. Along the way, I worked construction as a painter, and for 1 week, until the refrigeration system broke down, on a fishing boat out of Darwin Harbor with a captain named Dave and his wife. Dave had lost his leg below the knee earlier in a motorcycle accident in Bali. One day we were out in a dinghy testing his new invention for vacuuming shellfish off the sea floor, with his shiny .357 Magnum resting on his lap in case a crocodile appeared. It occurred to me then that perhaps I had taken my admiration for Melville a little bit too far. When I became a finalist for this project in the spring of 2024, I returned to Moby Dick. This time I paid particular attention to the opening chapters and Melville's descriptions of New Bedford. And when I learned that the sculpture would stand here on the grounds of the Bethel, the question became much more specific. How could the sculpture belong not just to Moby Dick, but to New Bedford and to this particular place? At first I wasn't sure. Then a friend mentioned Scrimshaw and set something off. I remembered that extraordinary image later in Moby Dick of a temple formed around an enormous skeleton of a whale. I began imagining those bones as an architectural form, something Melville could stand among and emerge from. And that brought me back here to the Bethel and to Father Mackel's sermon, on Jonah in chapter 9. At the heart of Father Melville's sermon is Jonah's flight from the truth he has been commanded to tell. He goes to sea, passes through the whale, and returns to the task he tried to escape. Father Melville gives that lesson its extraordinary formulation: to preach the truth to the face of falsehood. That idea seemed to reach beyond Jonah, Ishmael, and ultimately to Melville himself. All three go to sea. All three pass through an ordeal. And all three, in very different ways, return from that experience with a story that must be told. That is the idea I wanted the sculpture outside to embody. Melville stands among three enormous bones of the whale, his feet and legs partially engulfed by a tumultuous sea. The bones are part whale, part architecture, and perhaps part of the creature from which Jonah has just emerged. I wanted Melville to seem as though he too has passed through the whale and come out the other side. For me, the bones became the point where the journeys of Jonah, Ishmael, and Melville meet. Around the granite base, the hymn Father Melville leads the congregation in singing is inscribed, another thread connecting the sculpture to Jonah, the sermon, and the Bethel. Melville's hand rests lightly on one of the bones. This gesture was important to me. It isn't a gesture of possession or dominance, but of reverence, an acknowledgement of something that cannot be mastered. And in that sense, Melville's relationship to the whale is very different from Ahab's. Ahab wants to master what he cannot understand, to confront the power behind it and ultimately defeat it. But the whale, the sea, nature, and life itself cannot be contained or controlled. Ishmael realizes this. He survives, he returns, and he tells the story. And that is why this location matters so much. New Bedford isn't simply a backdrop at the beginning of Moby Dick. It is the threshold of the journey. Ishmael comes here before going to sea. He meets Queequeg here. He walks these streets. And here, in the Seaman's Bethel, he listens to Father Melville tell the story of Jonah before embarking on the voyage that becomes Moby Dick. Melville transformed those experiences into literature, but the physical places remain. We are in one of them now. So I wanted the sculpture outside to bring these worlds together: Melville, Ishmael, and Jonah, the whale and the sea, and this particular place in New Bedford where the journeys converge. I'm deeply grateful that the sculpture has found its permanent home here at the place where one of those journeys begins. In a moment, we will hear the sermon that Melville imagined being preached in this very place. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. As we've heard several times today, one of the most memorable chapters in Moby Dick takes place right here in the Seaman's Bethel, where Father Melville delivers his unforgettable sermon on Jonah and the whale. In the film version, which I'm going to digress for a moment, which was premiered at the Criterion Theater. Filmmakers created the ship's pulpit to capture Melville's vivid description. Following the film's release, visitors came to New Bedford expecting to see the dramatic pulpit, only to discover that the Bethel's original pulpit looked quite different. In response, the New Bedford Port Society commissioned and installed the ship's proud pulpit that stands here today. They did this in 1961, forever linking the Bethel's literary history with its living legacy. The film's Father Melville was portrayed by the legendary Orson Welles, whose performance introduced generations of audiences to one of the novel's most powerful passages. Today, we have the extraordinary privilege of hearing those words once again, read by an actor whose own career has become part of American cultural history. For more than 5 decades, Steve Watson has captivated audiences